welcome back to the Security Expo podcast. And today we are talking with Tony Keane. Tony is the Security and Integrity Manager for the AFL. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
Now, did I get your position and description right for your job?
I'm the Head of Integrity and Security at the AFL, yes.
And I mean, that's a fairly sort of senior role. Tell us a little bit about your background and your journey. How did you end up being in this position?
Look, it's a really good question. I had a background in policing for about 14 or 15 years with Victoria Police, primarily as an investigator. I was a detective there, worked in a lot of the various squads in town. I moved across to the AFL in about 2014 in an integrity role, so primarily as an investigator to come across there, and I've been there ever since. So it's been a really exciting time at the AFL to be a part of that. And you look back now and it's 11, nearly 12 years or so later, and I'm still there. So yeah, really pleased with the move.
And had security ever sort of been on the radar as a career option for you, or were you, I mean, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the integrity role at the AFL.
Yeah, well, I guess my skills from Victoria Police were the driver to move across initially into the integrity space. As I said, that was about 2014. I think the landscape in Australia was just starting to, pick up in that CT space. There was starting to be a number of disruptions, really successful disruptions by law enforcement and obviously ASIO working together. And so that sort of evolved for us at the AFL around that time due to what we were seeing sort of domestically and internationally.
Okay. And what I find of interest is, from memory from past discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the first person at the AFL to you've headed up and spearheaded this role as security and integrity and all the rest of it. So what had they been doing previously?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of businesses at that time and organisations were, heavily reliant on law enforcement to drive perhaps the decision-making, what the security overlays would look like at various events and what have you. And I think the introduction in 2017, I think it was, the national guidelines for the protection of crowded places really shifted the onus onto owners and operators to take a greater responsibility. And so that was probably a key driver for us at the AFL at the time, was just to take a greater responsibility rather than just leaving it to law enforcement or leaving it to the stadiums that we were playing our games of football in. So we really built out a security portfolio and capability back then in 2015. And that's really just expanded for us since that time. And I mean, now we have, we're playing games, men's and women's at elite level. We've also got second tier VFL. And we've got third tier, what we call Coach League. So we're playing 900 plus games a season now across those 6 competitions. We're operating in about 50 plus stadiums around the country, and we still manage, between 100 and 200 significant events for the business nationally as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. When you said you came in as, the integrity lead, was the security something that was playing on your mind when you first came in? Was that something that sort of came into your consciousness as you were getting familiar with the role? And even though the push to the, securing of crowded spaces legislation that came out in 2017 was the catalyst, had you been thinking prior to that, okay, we need to expand this role to include more of the security side of things? Or, I guess the point I'm driving at was that something you had always thought you would try and encompass?
Yeah, look, I think it's something that's always been a strong interest or passion for me. And definitely attending the games in an integrity capacity and having a law enforcement background, I was noticing that we probably needed to be more involved than what we were. And that's probably the benefit of having that policing background. So was really well supported by our CEO at the time, Gil McLaughlin, who was fantastic in relation to his appetite for security and target hardening our industry. So I got great support from the CEO and then our commission as well. And we were able to then fund and build out our capability and really start to take ownership for that risk and for our sites and events.
So tell me a little bit about building out that capability. What did that journey look like, and what are some of the sort of key lessons you've learned along the way?
Yeah, look, a couple that definitely stand out would be relationships is the first thing. So relationships are critical for you if you're able to do this. So law enforcement, obviously a really key one for us. I'm also a member of the Business Advisory Group, sits under the ANZ CTC. So having links into various groups like that, extending our relationships with our stadiums. So as I said, we're operating in 50 plus stadiums. That's a lot of stakeholders to be, very tight with in relation to what your security overlay looks like and what you're planning to do on a weekly basis with the games. Obviously, intelligence agency is really important with regards to that as well. So relationships would be the big key one, making sure that you build foundations for them and work on them as well. It's not just having, an introduction. You've got to invest the time to work on those relationships. So that's key. The second one is probably more intelligence driven. So just starting to understand what is the environment that we're operating in. So for the AFL, we're looking at sort of 8 million patrons coming through our turnstiles each year. So it's a lot of people. And as I said, a lot of stadiums. So building our intel capability and building up our intelligence holdings were really important to us. So we spent a lot of time and invested money in creating a really highly capable intel team. And so that allowed us to drive a lot of that intelligence. Probably the second branch off that would be we created a visible presence at all of our games. And we did that by essentially establishing a network of casuals or contractors that work for us at a game day. So I think I mentioned before, we cover 900 games around the country. There's no way for my sort of small team of 15 full-timers to resource all of those games. So we created a network of integrity and security officers. We've got about 48, 49, nearly 50 members in that at the moment, and we roster them around the country. So they are, in a lot of ways, our boots on the ground. And that's actually driving, through those people, that's driving a lot of intel for us as well. So we've got a greater understanding now of what's happening on the ground at our stadiums. We've got a greater understanding of what the posture and the gaps and the vulnerabilities are at each of those stadiums. And we're doing that and driving that through these contractors, which we deploy at the ground. So I think to summarize your question, John, probably relationships, intelligence, and then having that visible presence on the ground is really important.
Yep. Traditionally, I imagine you would have relied heavily on local, state and territory police forces for the intelligence. Have you, over that journey, developed your own intelligence unit? And if you can't talk about this, that's fine. But have you developed your own intelligence unit, or is that something that you intend to do moving forward?
Yeah, so we do have a really terrific intel team. We've got 2 full-timers inside that. Both of them are ex-law enforcement, so they've got all the qualifications necessary in that intel space for us. So they're doing a whole heap of things, obviously, driving or taking that information from our game reports that those casuals are sending in to us, but they're also looking at social media. We're using various platforms and software to extract what we need from open source information. So, we're driving vulnerability assessments and all those sorts of things based on intel to help us have that greater understanding of what that environment looks like.
Yeah. If you could summarize it, for you, I know there's going to be a whole raft of these, but what are the biggest challenges you're facing from a security point of view right now? Because I know that the security challenges, or I don't know, I imagine the security challenges are slightly different to the integrity challenges. What are the big security challenges you're facing now? And has that evolved much over the last couple of years and changed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think post-COVID, we're all still facing that little bit of a lag where we haven't seen the numbers come back to the security industry. And I'm talking about physical guarding. There were a lot of guards naturally left the industry at that time because there were no events, there were no sporting games to work, and they needed to find other sources of income. So I'm not sure we're back to those levels that we had in 2019 just yet. So I think that's a bit of a challenge for us. And that can lead to, other issues such as the capability of the guards that we have is also a bit of a challenge. And then obviously the continuity in having them on a weekly basis or a daily basis, depending on what the event is. But certainly from a football point of view, we're a weekly event, and we're up against a lot of other organisations and events who sometimes are offering a 10 or a 12-hour shift, and a football game can tend to be a 5 or 6-hour shift. So there are some other challenges for us there in attracting guards to come and work at our events, in addition to perhaps the lack of numbers generally.
Yeah. Do you think the industry as a whole, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but I know that you're involved in a few different sort of, groups that sit across the industry, from the Medals Foundation to others. Do you think the industry is doing enough to try and attract the talent back into the industry? And what more do you feel we might be able to do, including media outlets like, the one that I'm representing?
Yeah, look, I think bringing attention to it through media like this is a fantastic initiative, and we need more of that. Absolutely. Obviously, there are some cost challenges as well. Security is expensive nowadays, so that can be difficult for some organisations and put some increased burden on various events and so forth. So, I guess there's a number of factors that are influencing those numbers returning to the industry, but I think the more that we can do, like today, which is why I was happy to be involved with you today, is just to promote the security industry. It is a great job, it's a great industry, and we'd love to see more people come back and join.
Yeah. Last question for you. What do you feel is sort of like your big aha moment over the last 11 or so years? If you could point to a particular thing that you've learned along your journey from policing into security management and now running sort of large teams of people, are there one or two things that stand out in your mind as those crucible moments where the light bulb's gone off and you thought, wow, that's really powerful?
Yeah, look, I think the key thing for me, and I've already mentioned it, is probably relationships and just how important they are. And particularly for us, like we're a national competition. We play right around the country, 900 plus games, 50 plus stadiums. Without key partners and key partnerships, it's really difficult to deliver what we need to deliver. So that'd be the key thing that stands out for me, I think, over the 11 or 12 years I've been here, is just how important it is to build those relationships and invest time in maintaining them.
Fantastic. Well, look, Tony, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, and hopefully we get to see you at the Security Expo at the end of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're planning to attend, that's taking place at the end of August in Darling Harbour at the ICC in Sydney, and we look forward to seeing you all there.